You already know how the scene ends. The dirt, the blood, the shot that echoes across the New Mexico desert. You've watched it 100 times. You've felt the gut punch every single time. But what if I told you that one sentence, one single counteroffer changes everything? Not just for Hank, not just for Walt, for every single person they've ever touched. This is what happens when Hank Schrader doesn't die in the dirt. And the answer is going to disturb you, because surviving turns out to be far worse than dying. The hammer clicks on an empty chamber. That's the moment. Right there. That's the sound that should have saved Hank Schrader. But Walt doesn't just throw money at Jack Welker. He doesn't beg. He does something no one in that desert expects him to do. He offers himself. Completely. Unconditionally. He looks Jack in the eye and says, "You need me alive more than you need him dead." Think about that for a second. Walt doesn't appeal to Jack's mercy. Jack doesn't have mercy. He appeals to Jack's greed. He points at Todd, nervous, fumbling Todd, and says, "That kid can't cook to Lydia's standard. You pull the trigger right now, your product drops and your profit disappears with it. I'll cook until I die. You keep me working, you keep the money flowing. All I'm asking for is that man's life." Jack lowers the gun. He accepts the deal. And in that moment, the moment Hank Schrader takes his first breath as a free man, everything gets so much worse. The trucks pull away into a red cloud of dust. Walter White disappears inside one of them, handcuffed, shoved between two armed men who don't even look at him. He's not Heisenberg anymore. He's inventory. He stares out at the scrubland as it blurs past, still trying to run the numbers in his head, still trying to find the angle, the play, the exit. There isn't one. He traded his freedom to save a man who hates him, and now Hank is the only thing keeping him alive, and the biggest threat he's ever faced. Walt keeps staring out the window. The handcuffs bite into his wrists. He thinks about the $80 million still in the ground somewhere behind them, and what it means that he can no longer reach it. He thinks about Jesse, still chained somewhere in that compound. He runs every variable and arrives at the same answer every time. He is not a chess player anymore. He is a chess piece, and the man holding him just realized how much he's worth. Back in the dust, Hank drags himself across the ground toward the only other figure still on the desert floor. Stephen Gomez isn't moving. He's not going to move. Hank sits beside his partner, his friend, and the weight of that hits him all at once. Gomez is dead because of an operation Hank started alone, without sanction, without backup, without anyone even knowing they were out there. That makes this Hank's fault. Not the bullets, not Jack Welker, Hank. He brought Gomez out here on a personal vendetta dressed up as a law enforcement operation, and Gomez trusted him, and now Gomez is in the dirt. That thought will never leave him. Not for the rest of his life. In the original timeline, Hank dies a hero. His integrity stays clean, his legacy stays intact. His wife gets to grieve a good man. The story stays simple. This version of Hank doesn't get that. He gets to live with it. He crawls to his feet. He checks the badge in his pocket, the one he's technically no longer authorized to carry, and he realizes something awful. If he calls this in, the story he has to tell will destroy everything he has left. There is no version of this report that doesn't end with his career in ashes and Gomez's family asking questions he can't answer. But he has no choice. He makes the call. The man who walks out of To'Ajali is not the Hank Schrader we knew. That version died the moment Jack Welker lowered his weapon. The man walking now is a ghost, haunted by the partner he couldn't save and the brother-in-law he didn't stop. Survival doesn't bring Hank back to Albuquerque as a hero. It brings him back as a suspect. The DEA field office doesn't roll out a welcome. The moment he steps through those doors, his badge is gone. His gun is gone. The Office of Professional Responsibility puts him in a small, airless room with two agents who are not on his side, and they start asking questions that Hank doesn't have clean answers to. The questions are quiet and methodical. Not hostile, exactly worse than hostile. Clinical. They're not looking for the story of a brave agent who nearly caught the biggest drug dealer in DEA history. They're looking for violations. And there are so many violations that the list fills multiple pages before they've even gotten to the afternoon of the shooting. Here's what you need to understand about the legal doctrine called the fruit of the poisonous tree. It means this: if the source of your evidence is dirty, everything that grew from it is dirty too. You can't pick clean fruit off a poisoned root. The law doesn't care how good your intentions were or how right you turned out to be. It cares about procedure. And Hank's entire investigation is a procedural catastrophe. The GPS tracker on Walt's car? No warrant. The confession tape from Jesse Pinkman? Obtained under duress with no attorney present in an unofficial interrogation that Hank had no legal standing to conduct. The copy of Leaves of Grass that Hank kept in his garage for months instead of immediately logging into evidence, that alone is a career-ending violation. And those are just the easy ones. There is no case. There is no Heisenberg prosecution. There's just a disgraced agent sitting in a room trying to explain why his partner is dead in an unauthorized operation on federal land with no backup, no warrant, and no paper trail that puts him there in any official capacity. And here's the part that guts you. Hank realizes it himself sitting there under those fluorescent lights, watching the agents across the table take notes. His survival actually protects Walter White. If Hank had died in that desert, he'd have been a martyr. A dead DEA agent whose story demands answers, demands a full investigation, demands a response that doesn't stop until someone is in cuffs. There's a political pressure in martyrdom that the living can't generate. Alive, he's a rogue agent with inadmissible evidence, a dead partner on his conscience, and a story that sounds, if you don't know the full picture, like a reckless personal crusade that got someone killed. His testimony is worthless. His credibility is destroyed. And Walt's operation keeps running, fueled by the very man who bought Hank's life. He survived the Nazis. He cannot survive the paperwork. Meanwhile, on the other side of Albuquerque, Skyler White's world doesn't end with a phone call. It ends with a battering ram. In the timeline you know, Walt calls Skyler from a burner phone, his voice deliberate, every word chosen carefully, the entire performance scripted for the recording police. He throws her under the bus in exactly the right way. He makes her the victim so the law has to let her go. It's the last truly brilliant thing he does. That call never happens here. Walt is in the back of a truck, watching the desert blur past, handcuffs on his wrists. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have a plan. The tactical teams hit the White residence without warning. No script, no narrative. Just agents and questions and Skyler White standing in her living room with no alibi, no cover story, and no husband calling in to save her. Hank doesn't come back as a sympathetic brother-in-law trying to hold the family together. He comes back as a witness for the prosecution, driven by a sense of betrayal that runs deeper than anything he's ever felt in 20 years on the job. He remembers the diner. He remembers sitting across from Skyler, offering her a real way out of the fire before it consumed her entirely. She looked him in the eye and said no. She chose the operation over her own children. She made that choice with full knowledge of what she was protecting. Now she sits across from him in an interrogation room, and that choice is the government's entire case. The prosecutors aren't just looking at money laundering anymore. They're building conspiracy, racketeering. They argue with documented dates and specific transactions pulled directly from the car wash records that her silence wasn't fear. It was a calculated business decision. She ran the books. She managed the LLC. She signed the documents. She kept the machine running with the quiet efficiency of a woman who understood exactly what she was doing and chose to keep doing it. The story of the helpless wife doesn't survive contact with her own handwriting on fraudulent receipts. What's remarkable is how quickly the image of Skyler White, the terrified, trapped suburban mother, dissolves once the paper trail is laid out in order. Document after document, transaction after transaction, tells a story of a woman who wasn't being dragged behind the operation. She was running part of it. Not the dangerous part, not the chemistry or the distribution or the violence. The clean, professional, institutional part that made all of it invisible to outside scrutiny. And that, the prosecutors argue, made her indispensable. Marie Schrader becomes the force that dismantles what's left of the family. The slap at the car wash that you remember, that explosive, grief-drenched moment, doesn't happen here. What happens instead is colder, more efficient. Marie moves immediately to secure emergency custody of Flynn and Holly. She files through family court, deploying Hank's physical injuries, his documented trauma, his medical records as evidence that the environment Skylar created is a clear and present danger to her own children. She's not acting out of pure emotion. She's been sitting in that bedroom with Hank at night, watching him lie awake staring at the ceiling, and she's decided, clearly, deliberately, that the White family is not going to walk away from this. It's not a fight between sisters anymore. It's a legal execution. The storage unit full of cash, the one Walt buried under the desert in the original timeline, is still there. Walt didn't have time to move it. The agents find the receipt in the White home, trace the unit, and open it to find enough money to fund a small country. Every fraudulent entry in the car wash books, every fake receipt Skylar filed with professional care, all of it becomes exhibit after exhibit in a case that gets stronger every day. Skylar realizes what Hank realized in that interrogation room, that her survival protects Walter White about as well as her testimony would have. She protected him to the end, and the end is a cell. 40 miles from the courtroom, in a concrete room that smells like ammonia and stale air, Walter White and Jesse Pinkman stand side by side, not as partners, not as enemies, as two animals in the same cage, shackled to the same railing, forced to cook the same product for the same machine that destroyed both their lives. The situation has a grotesque poetry to it. The teacher and the student, reunited under the worst possible circumstances, their entire history compressed into the silence between them. In the original timeline, Jesse suffers this alone. He has no one to blame, no one who shares the full weight of what this place is and what it costs. In this version, Walt is there with him, and somehow, against all logic, that makes it worse. The Heisenberg ego is gone. There's no dominance here, no intellectual superiority, no performance for an audience. Walt moves through the cook with mechanical precision, measuring, mixing, checking temperatures with the focus of a man who has nothing left but the work. He's not proud of it. He doesn't take satisfaction in the purity readings. He does it because it's the only currency he has left. Every gram of blue product that slides off the tray is a ransom payment. He's buying Hank's continued existence one batch at a time, clinging to the delusion that compliance will eventually buy mercy. Jesse doesn't speak to him. He doesn't look at him. The look, when it comes a flat, sideways glance that communicates a specific contempt no words could improve on, says everything. He sees the man who sold his soul to save a brother-in-law who despises him and dragged Jesse into the abyss as a footnote in the transaction. He sees a man who, even now, probably believes he made the right call. Todd Alquist manages the operation with the polite efficiency of a man who genuinely cannot perceive the horror of what he's participating in. He brings coffee in the mornings. He asks, in a tone of genuine professional interest, whether the reaction temperature held steady overnight. He treats Walt with a reverent fascination the way a kid treats a science fair winner, never acknowledging that the science fair winner is chained to a metal railing and hasn't seen natural light in months. His eyes don't change, his smile doesn't waver. The chain on their ankles does the threatening for him. But the real instability doesn't live inside the lab. It lives above ground, pacing in a glass-walled office at the Madrigal Electromotive building. Lydia Rodarte Quayle. The moment news reaches Lydia that Hank Schrader is alive, that a DEA agent who can identify her by face, name her by association, describe her meetings and her methods and her role in the distribution network is still breathing and talking to investigators, her composure shatters. Quietly, internally, behind a composed expression and a too tight grip on her coffee cup. She operates on a frequency of high-functioning dread at the best of times. This is not the best of times. She becomes the destabilizing element in a machine that Jack thought was running clean. She starts working on Todd not with direct orders, but with the kind of constant, dripping anxiety that gets into everything. She makes the case, again and again, that Hank Schrader is a live wire, touching everything they've built. Jack is confident in his intimidation tactics. He trusts that the calculation is obvious: to Hank to cooperate and your family stays safe. Jack thinks in terms of physical threats and understands how they work. Lydia thinks in terms of institutional exposure. She sees a former DEA agent with nothing left to lose, no badge, no career, no oversight. And she knows that a man like that doesn't stay contained by threats to people he's already lost. The gap between how Jack sees the Schrader situation and how Lydia sees it widens every week. And in that gap, the fracture in the gang's structure deepens. Jack is content. Lydia is not. And content people don't protect their operations the way scared people do. Out in Albuquerque, a man who used to be a DEA agent is converting his garage into a forward operating base for a war that no one has officially declared. The mineral collection is gone. The home brewery equipment is gone. The shelves that used to hold labeled specimens now hold surveillance printouts, city maps with hand-drawn annotations, and photographs taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The walls are covered in connection diagrams that look like madness to anyone who doesn't know the full story, and like a confession to anyone who does. Hank Schrader is no longer bound by the Fourth Amendment. He's no longer bound by chain of command, or the Office of Professional Responsibility, or the annual ethics review that every federal agent sits through. All of that burned the day his badge was taken. What's left is a man who spent 2 decades learning exactly how criminal networks operate their vulnerabilities, their communication channels, their supply chains, their human weak points, and who now has absolutely no institutional reason to care about the legal constraints that made that knowledge difficult to use. He starts liquidating. His savings first, then assets. Surveillance equipment purchased through intermediaries who don't keep records. Firearms bought in parking lots from people who don't ask what they're for. He drives cars borrowed from people who owe him favors from 20 years of working the margins of the legal system, from informants and fence sitters, and people who sometimes needed a DEA agent to look the other way. He becomes the thing he spent his career hunting. Not a drug dealer, an operator. A man who moves in the shadows, uses the same logic as the men he tracked, applies the same ruthlessness to the problem. The irony is not lost on him. He just doesn't care anymore. He focuses on Lydia because she's the only thread connecting the operation to the surface world. She's the only person in the entire network who walks in daylight, who meets with real companies, who has a name and an address and a coffee shop she visits on Tuesdays. Jack Welker doesn't walk into Madrigal. Todd doesn't either. Lydia does. And every time she does, she brings her nervous energy and her expensive handbag and her paranoid attention to the people around her, and she never once notices the man in the car across the street. Hank watches her for 2 weeks. He learns her patterns. He learns that her fear is constant, but her decisions are fast. She's developed a terrible efficiency about operating while scared. He decides she's not a suspect to be interviewed, or a witness to be cultivated. She's a pressure point. You find the right moment, you apply the right pressure, and the information comes out. He picks a Tuesday. He's in the coffee shop before she arrives. He's already sitting in the booth she always takes when she needs privacy, back corner, view of the door. When she walks in and sees him, something in her face goes completely blank. This isn't the Hank Schrader she might have prepared for. Not a federal agent with a legal threat and a business card. This is something older and quieter. He places his hand on top of hers, flat and heavy, before she can think about getting up. He doesn't say her name. He doesn't need to. He describes, specifically and without emotion, what happens if she doesn't give him what he needs. Not jail. He doesn't threaten jail. He describes what the Juarez cartel does to people who become operational loose ends in their network. He names names she recognizes. He describes outcomes she's already lost sleep over. He describes her daughter, her actual daughter, with her name, growing up without her mother. Lydia breaks in under 3 minutes. The coordinates come out in a whisper. She trades the location of the compound for the story she tells herself in that booth, which is that this will make her problem disappear. She sells out her partners with the same frantic, efficient self-preservation that's kept her functional inside a criminal enterprise for years. She's very good at it. She's had a lot of practice. Hank walks out to the parking lot, gets in the stolen car, and starts driving toward the desert. The line he just crossed doesn't have a way back. He knows it. He doesn't stop. The compound sits in the dark, like a scar on the landscape. From the outside, it looks impenetrable. Perimeter fence, generator-lit exterior, armed guards on rotation. Inside, Walt and Jesse run another cook under the red glow of industrial lighting. The routine is so deep it's erased the concept of time. Cook, clean, sleep. Cook, clean, sleep. Todd watches from the gantry. The chains clink against the railing in the silence between steps. Then the exterior lights go out. Not a flicker, not a fault. A clean cut, deliberate. The sound of wire cutters doesn't reach them in the lab, but the silence that follows does a different quality of silence. A silence with weight behind it, like the pause before a door opens. Hank moves through the perimeter the way he'd studied cartel operatives moving on surveillance footage for 20 years. Methodical, patient, dismantling one layer at a time without triggering a coordinated response. He's not charging in, he's removing options. The first guard doesn't make a sound. Hank takes his rifle, checks the action, keeps moving forward. He's not performing for anyone. There's no bravado left, just forward motion. The emergency lights click on inside. Red, dim, humming. Todd straightens on the gantry, his posture shifting from casual to alert in a single movement. He reaches for Jesse. Without looking, grabs him by the collar and brings the pistol up. Not to protect Jesse, to use him. Walt looks up from the reaction vessel. He listens to the gunfire filtering down through the concrete, and he knows the way he always knows things before other people do what it means. A rival operation would have hit the perimeter loud and fast. A cartel would have bombed the entrance. This is quiet. This is precise. This is somebody who knows exactly where to cut to make the whole thing bleed from the inside. Jack bursts into the lab, his face cycling through fury and confusion, and something that's starting to look like fear. The monitors flicker back for 1 second, just one frame of footage, and show a limping figure in the motor pool, double tapping a downed guard and moving on without pausing. Jack stares at the screen. The man he left alive in the desert. The man he spared in exchange for an $80 million chemistry lab and a clean, compliant cook. The broken pawn who was supposed to guarantee Walt's obedience. That man is walking through his compound with a rifle, and he is not negotiating with anyone. He screams for his men to kill the lights, kill the hostages, kill everything that moves. But the last word cracks. Because somewhere behind the rage, he's doing the same math Walt did in the truck on the way out of Tohajali, running the variables and arriving at a verdict. He made the classic error. He looked at the hero's life and calculated it as an asset. He forgot it could become a weapon. The breaching charge takes the steel door off its frame. The concussion rolls through the lab like a physical wave. Concrete dust billows through the entrance, and through the haze, Hank Schrader steps in. He's covered in blood and grit. His limp is worse. He's breathing hard. He moves with the deliberateness of a man who has accepted that he might not walk back out, and that acceptance has cleared everything else away. What's left is pure purpose. Walt looks up from the gantry, chained, pale, hollowed out, and cannot make his brain process what it's seeing. The man he buried in the back of his mind, the man whose life he traded himself for, is standing in the red light of the emergency lamps, holding an automatic rifle in a room that smells like his own life's work. It doesn't look like a rescue. There's no relief in those eyes, no warmth. It looks like a verdict. Jack lifts his weapon. The motion doesn't finish. Hank doesn't read rights. He doesn't offer options. He puts the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood down with 3 controlled shots that prioritize the outcome over the performance. Jack Welker hits the floor mid-sentence, his last order still forming in his throat. Todd moves fast, dragging Jesse toward the back wall, using him as cover, calculating angles. There are no angles. One shot. The problem ends. The echo dies. What's left is the drip of coolant from a cracked line somewhere behind the reaction vessels, and the sound of 2 men breathing in a room full of wreckage. Hank lowers the rifle. He doesn't rush anywhere. He stands in the middle of the lab and reads the room. The equipment, the procedure list on the whiteboard, the barrels of precursor chemicals, the chain on the railing, the man attached to the chain. He reads it the way a fire investigator reads a structure that's already burned, looking for the origin point. There's no relief in his face, no victory. Something cleaner, and harder than either of those. He walks to Jesse first. He finds the key on Todd's body. He cuts Jesse loose without a word. The physical act reaching for Jesse before Walt, choosing him first, is not an accident. It's the most honest statement Hank has made since this whole thing started. Jesse is the victim. Walt is the architect. Hank grabs Walt by the collar and hauls him upright. Not to help him, to look at him. The way a doctor looks at a patient who arrived at exactly the diagnosis they predicted and refuses to acknowledge the choices that got them there. Walt tries to form words. The first sentence never finishes. There is no angle. They climb the stairs out of the lab, Walt stumbling on the steps, his legs weak from confinement and the illness that went untreated in the lab, and emerge into the cool desert night. The sky above them is enormous, full of stars, uninterested in the bodies on the floor below. The desert air smells like creosote and cooling metal. 3 men stand in the dust outside a compound that will be on every federal agency's radar within 48 hours. Jesse is the first one to move. The shock of the lab fades and his body takes over pure, ancient survival response. He runs for the nearest truck with the jerky, desperate energy of a man who has been caged so long that open space feels wrong. In any other version of this scene, the cop shouts, "Stop." Hank doesn't move. He watches the truck's headlights swing wide, watches it accelerate through the gate, watches the taillights shrink into the dark and disappear. He lets him go. Walt watches Jesse's escape, and the beginning of a protest forms in his expression and stops when he catches Hank's face. He understands, with the uncomfortable clarity that comes from knowing someone too well, that arguing right now is the wrong move. So he starts talking about something else. He can't help it. Silence is the most dangerous environment Walter White has ever operated in. He starts talking about the night as a joint operation, about necessity. 2 men who saw what the system couldn't handle and did what had to be done. He brings up the 80 million, says it's still recoverable, says Skylar's name, Marie's, the kids. He tries greed, then loyalty, then appeals to the shared sacrifice of men who have both bled for the same outcome. Hank stares at the road ahead. He doesn't acknowledge the money. He doesn't react to the names. His silence isn't the silence of a man considering the arguments. It's the silence of a man who has already made every decision that matters and is waiting for the other person to run out of words. Walt's voice fills the car, bouncing off the glass, filling every gap, and the car is completely indifferent to it. That indifference is more devastating than any counter-argument. It forces Walt to hear himself, to listen to the rationalizations arrive and echo and dissolve, one after another, to sit with how small it all sounds out loud. The car doesn't head toward the DEA office. Walt notices that as they pass the exit ramp, and something in his stomach clenches. They pass the hospital turnoff. The city lights of Albuquerque lay out ahead of them, and Hank drives through all of it, every off-ramp that leads somewhere with rules and procedures and oversight, and keeps going until the pavement ends. Gravel, rock formations, moonlight. The headlights sweep across the familiar silhouette of the landscape, and Walt's breath changes. He recognizes the geography in his bones. This is where it started. This is where the money was buried. This is where every coordinate on every lottery ticket in every Schrader garage map eventually points. The engine ticks as it cools. Hank kills the lights. Darkness. Then the moon asserts itself over the desert floor, slow and indifferent. Hank gets out of the car with a heaviness that isn't from the injuries. He walks around to the passenger door, opens it, and his expression when he looks at Walt is something that doesn't have a good word for it. Not hate exactly. Not contempt exactly. Something older than both. There's no cell signal here. There's no backup. There are no witnesses. The legal framework Walt spent the drive fantasizing about navigating has been replaced by something that predates every law he has ever broken. They walk into the scrubland. Walt's legs are unsteady months of confinement, plus the cancer that went untreated in the lab, plus an exhaustion that no amount of ego can override. He stumbles on the uneven ground. He keeps trying to calculate. The variables keep coming back empty. Hank stops at a patch of earth that looks wrong. Disturbed. Uneven at the edges and too packed at the center. In the original timeline, $80 million is buried here. In this one, the hole is empty. An open scar on the desert floor. Hank goes to the trunk. He comes back with a shovel. He doesn't use it himself. He sets it down at Walt's feet and steps back. Walt looks at the shovel. He looks at the ground. He looks at Hank. Hank doesn't gesture. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. Walt understands immediately, the way he always understands things all at once, completely, with no ambiguity. This isn't about the money. The money is irrelevant to both of them at this point. This is about the only thing that's still down there. The only thing that Hank left here in the dark on the day this all went wrong. The person Hank couldn't carry out. Stephen Gomez. Walt picks up the shovel. The caliche layer is hard and dry. His arms aren't strong. They haven't been strong in months. Every stroke costs something. His lungs burn. The cough comes back. He begs for water after 20 minutes. His voice reduced to something small and genuine, stripped of every inflection he spent 2 years cultivating. He gets no response. He keeps digging. He tries one more time some formulation, some appeal, some reframing of the situation that will make Hank see him as something other than what he is. The words dissolve before they fully form. He runs out of angles. He runs out of persona. He runs out of everything. What's left is just a sick man in a hole he dug himself. No more teacher. No more Kingpin. No more Heisenberg. Just Walt, the chemistry teacher from Albuquerque, who made one decision too many and followed it all the way down to the bottom. The shovel hits something soft. Walt goes completely still. He doesn't look down. He looks up at Hank, standing above the rim of the hole, and the expression on Hank's face is the most frightening thing Walter White has seen in 2 years of living inside a criminal empire. It's not rage. It's not grief. It's resolution. Walt closes his eyes. He braces. He's ready. He knows what he deserves. He's done the math on this too, and there's only one answer that makes sense. He waits for the end of the cancer and the lie and everything that grew from them. Hank's hand goes to the holster. He draws the weapon. He holds it there, aimed, steady, for a long moment that has no clean measure of time inside it. And then he holsters it. The click of the polymer settling into place sounds like a sentence handed down. Hank reaches into the hole, not to help Walt up, but to drag him out. By the shirt, over the edge. Walt's knees scrape on the hard desert floor, and Hank doesn't slow down. He hauls him to the car, slams him against the hood, the metal still warm from the drive, and reapplies the handcuffs with the mechanical efficiency of a man who has done this thousands of times, and never once thought he'd be doing it to his own family. Walter White will not die a legend. He won't die in a blaze of glory with the name Heisenberg on everyone's lips. He will die the way the cancer always intended. Slowly. In a federal prison hospital. In a room with bad lighting and no windows and visiting hours he won't use. He will watch the money get seized and the empire get dismantled and the name fade from the conversation the way all names eventually do. He will watch the world forget that Heisenberg ever existed and remember only the high school chemistry teacher who destroyed his family and took his partner's life with him when he went. Hank reaches for the radio. The camera would pull back here if this were a real episode. Up and back over the scrubland, rising above the rock formations, until the two figures on the desert floor shrink to nothing against the vast, indifferent dark of the New Mexico sky. The 80 million is absorbed by the sand. The compound is a crime scene. The empire is ash. What remains are consequences spreading out from that one moment in the desert, like heat distortion off the highway, touching everything and everyone in their path. Skylar in custody. Marie in family court. Jesse somewhere on a dark road, finally moving towards something instead of away. Walt in handcuffs, alive, with nothing left to protect him from the weight of what he is. The tragedy of Ozymandias is complete. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Hank drives back toward the city lights. He's not okay. The part of him that was okay is buried in the scrubland behind him. The part that believed in clean categories, hero and villain, law and crime, the good guys and the bad guys, that part died somewhere between his badge being taken and the moment he walked into a coffee shop and threatened a woman with a gun under the table. What's driving the car now is something that doesn't fit any of the clean categories. It's not justice. It's not vengeance exactly. It's the end of something, the settling of an account that the official system couldn't touch. He survived the desert. He brought Gomez home. He put Walter White in handcuffs for the last time. That's all he gets. And if you want to keep following this thread, if you want to find every moment in Breaking Bad where the whole story balanced on a single decision, where one different choice sends everything down a different road, the next video is already on screen. Because this story doesn't end at Tohajali. It never really ended at all.